Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Matt. Today, we're going to have our first guest interview. So for our first interview, I thought I would go with someone who is not only doing something interesting, but is also someone I know really well. My dad, John DeLockery. John was raised as a Christian in a small Michigan town, was born in 1954. After graduating from Michigan State University in mechanical engineering, he worked for DuPont in Texas and Tennessee for about 11 years. He then worked for Glass Steel Industrial Laminates on a startup of new circuit board laminate in Memphis. After 12 years there, he joined an audiovisual company doing video conferencing. After about 12 years there, he ended his career with 3.5 years at the elevator manufacturer, ThyssenKrupp. So Dad, welcome.
Thank you for having me do this.
Now, you've been doing something that you call gleaning the fields. What's that?
Well, it came out of the Bible verse. I was actually taking a Bible study on Ruth and Naomi, and they were basically going through after the harvest and getting what was left, and that was a biblical reference. But what we do is we go to a major food chain, and we pick up the fresh produce that they have and deliver it to food shelters. What's different about this is that we're taking fresh produce. Most of the food banks and food distribution areas take non-perishable food. And they do that because they don't know how long they're going to keep it on their shelves, and it's very difficult for them to take anything that has an expiration date on it. The major food chain also has a expiration date, or a date in which they, by their corporate rules, have to get rid of the food. So one of the guys that I was working with, that are working with us, there are basically three of us to put this together, was at this place and saw all the food going out and said, gosh, that's a waste. And he got talking to the manager, and the manager said, yeah, she was worried about how much they throw away, but what can we do? So he brought it up to the men's group, which is primarily made up of men that are retired, and since we live in the South, almost all of us have pickup trucks. And we decided to see what we could do. So as it turns out, we take their fresh produce that is deemed as expired by the grocery store, still edible, but they can't sell it any longer by their corporate policies, and we distribute it to various food banks around the town.
So you said expired food. Is it actually expired? Is it bad food that you're giving to the shelters?
It isn't. Some of it may have, there's a very small percentage, maybe less than 10%, that really we do end up ultimately throwing away. But it's food that is expired by the date that you're allowed to sell it by. But if you buy a bunch of bananas, there's a date that you buy it, take it home, and it sits on your counter for 4 or 5 days before you actually finish eating it, and it's still good. The trouble is, after those 4 or 5 days, the store couldn't sell it anymore, but you've still got that narrow window where the food is still in good shape. It's just that the food people are not allowed to sell it, or by their own policies, they don't sell it. So we pick it up every day. We go to the store, to their receiving department, and we pick up anywhere, usually around a pickup truck full, thereabouts. And we take it immediately to a charity on, for lack of a better word, a route.
So basically what happens is there's some sort of like internal corporate policy saying that after a given amount of time, you have to get rid of this food because they're worried about, there might be some bad stuff in there. They just don't want to have that in their stores past a certain point. But that doesn't mean that the food is actually bad, because nobody's actually just looking at it. It's just a policy on a piece of paper, and nobody's actually looking at the food. And what you're saying is that most of that food is still actually good, and then when you give it to the food shelter, they just get rid of the little bit that's bad. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, basically, because think about it, when you buy fresh lettuce or fresh food, you don't eat it instantly on that day. You maybe have it around for 4 or 5 days. But if you were to buy it 5 days later, it would probably only have another day left or so. So you wouldn't buy it. So they have to get rid of it because they logistically they overbought, or for whatever reason. And yeah, it's we look at it. The charities themselves, the food banks that we go to, look at it themselves to make sure if there's anything that really is bad, they throw it out. So no, it's not. It's not bad food. It's nothing I wouldn't eat. It's just that it's past the time in which you can sell it. But there's that narrow window after the time you can sell it to where it no longer can be eaten, and that's what we go after.
And these charities and food pantries are happy about this food?
Oh, they're thrilled because they never get fresh food because of the volatility of it, and because of how you have to move it very quickly. And that was the thing that we thought, well, we would just start it and see how much trouble we got into. And all of these are legitimate charities. We go to charities that are well established, well known, to make sure that they are giving it away and not reselling it or anything like that. So we make sure we go to places that are well known and that have a background and websites and have been vetted by somebody to make sure they're a legitimate charity. In the city of Memphis, there are tons of those places, so we don't lack for places to take it.
So how does this whole process work? You say you take it from the one place to the other. I mean, is it just you? Is it, you said maybe there was several people?
Well, we started out with just several of us, but it turned out that the store wanted to make it a policy or an everyday thing, so they asked if we could do it every single day, 7 days a week, 360 days a year. They're closed a few days. And we said, whoa, okay, maybe we can, maybe we can't. So I went back to the group of drivers that I had to pull from, and like I said, there are a lot of retired people in the men's group that I'm in, and I was able to find basically two people for every day. For instance, on Tuesday, Steve and Bob have Tuesday, and their job is to be at the store at 11 o'clock in the morning and pick it up. Steve and Bob both have pickup trucks, and if they one or the other will go. If one's busy, the other one go, or they may go together if they don't have anything else to do. So they've kind of got a built-in sub, if you will. That way, if they have a doctor's appointment or out of town or whatever, they don't have to look very hard for a sub. And we have two people for every day of the week, including Sunday. And it works out really well. I was surprised at how easily it just started to happen. I had enough drivers. I've probably got 15 plus people on the list, plus several subs, retired, in this case, guys that don't have anything else to do and be more than happy to run over there and pick it up.
So for somebody to take a day and run this route, they really only have to, spend a couple hours on a given day once every 2 weeks. So it's like a couple hours every 2 weeks, and that's all it takes.
It's all it takes. And, an hour or so every other week. Actually, some of the drivers go together because, they probably go out and have a cup of coffee afterwards or something, and somebody to talk to and get out. A lot of people just need a little something to do. And the people that we give it to are so thankful for getting the fresh food. I've got lots of stories about that, but it's interesting that this type of thing just fell together. It just happened. We didn't really plan very hard on it. We just kept saying, well, we'll see what happens. And here we are.
So you said food pantries don't get fresh food very often or fresh fruit. So you're actually giving them something that they don't have very often, and it's probably, I would imagine, good for people who are homeless to not just get more food, but to actually have something that doesn't come out of a can. It isn't the peanut butter that they're always sent a million times. It's probably helping them as well. Is that?
Oh yeah, they get a much more balanced diet, and we hear all the time. One of the things that we get a lot of is bagged salad that is pre-made, which really has a pretty good shelf life after the store rejects it. And getting greens and things like that, apples and we get a lot of bananas, for instance. The people who are on food pantry type things, yeah, you're right. They never get anything like that. They get canned peanut butter or things like that because of the volatility of it. Now, what we've learned is a lot of the food pantries have their, as they call them, clients show up one day a week. In other words, there's one that comes to mind that their day is Tuesday. where that's when they distribute their food. We deliver to them on Monday. So every Monday, the load that comes from the food that we pick up from the food store then is given to this charity on Monday. They go through it, and then one day later, it's distributed to the people. We've kind of gotten around that volatility issue by just making sure it happens quickly. Most food pantries that we've been dealing with have a certain day that they give it away, so that way it gets done quicker. I have also seen where we have shown up with one food pantry where we kind of overloaded their capacity. And I asked him, I said, well, do you need us to do something else? He goes, oh, no, I'll take care of it. And he started making phone calls to some of his clients and said, hey, I got a special load of stuff. Come on in. You can get bananas and apples and whatever we had. So those people came in right away off sequence just to help get the food distributed. And that seems to be a very common thing that the food pantries do. They know who to call. They know who needs it. And they'll call them up if they get something extra that we brought them.
Have you ever had much interaction with the food pantry's clients when you've brought this food?
Oh, yeah. I had a couple that come to mind. I had one gentleman. He was helping me out. He was just there when we pulled up, and I happened to have my foot in a cast and a walking cast, and he asked if he could help. I said, sure. So we helped carry all the food in there. We were partway done. When we got done, the director told him, she said, you can take whatever you want. We got a huge amount of food here. And he said, really? And he was kind of going through it. And I said, by the way, I've got some bananas over here. He said, bananas? Man, I haven't had a banana in so long. So I just, he went over there and took a whole bunch of them. And it was just like I'd given him a $100 bill, probably not quite like that. But he was just thrilled to get that. One of the days I was on my way to the food to drop it off matter of fact, I think it was the same food shelter. And there was a man on the street with a cardboard sign, we've all seen him, that said, hungry, need food. And I'm sitting here going, wait, I got an entire truck full of food behind me. So we stopped, rolled down the window, handed him a case of oranges, and he just kind of looked at us like, oh my God. And he'd think, nobody ever given him that before, He was hoping for $1, I think. Anyway, he just thanked us profusely, and we went on to the food shelter, and I told them what had happened. They said, oh yeah, we know that's so-and-so. They had a name for him. And they said, he'll probably eat a lot of them and he'll sell the rest, but okay, so he gets $1 a piece or whatever for the oranges, or gives them away to other people. It was distributed, and it's food that was going to go to the dumpster had we not done this. So, yeah, it's surprising how many letters and things we get back from these people that just, we get them all the time. And we make sure we copy these letters and send them on to the people at the food store so they can keep it in their upper management. And the people themselves, when we come to pick it up, they're always so appreciative of it because these are real people too. They all know people in need and everything, and they all go to churches and have this type of thing, and they always get to, oh, we're so glad, we just hated throwing this stuff away, and we're so glad it's going to a good cause. So yeah, there's been a lot of very positive feedback from it. And I think that's why the drivers like doing it. It's a good day.
So you're literally taking food that most of it you or I would eat, and you're giving it to people who are going to actually eat it, who are hungry, and it was just going to be thrown away.
Absolutely. And the difference here is that type of thing that you just mentioned is done all of the time with canned goods, for instance, or, like you said, jars of peanut butter. The trouble with fresh produce is the volatility of it, but we somehow just stumbled on to the fact that, gee, if we move it quickly and we arrive at the right time at the food pantry, right when they need it, then it gets distributed and it's in somebody's house probably within 24 hours after we pick it up. Somebody's got it on their table. You have to do that. We have no facilities. We do a little bit, but we don't store anything. What I say is we don't hold the food for more than an hour, and that's just the time it takes, because you can't. I mean, if you get into the complexity of trying to keep it, and then you have to worry about whether it's gone bad or not, and you have to have refrigeration, and then you start adding value to it and cost to it and all that. We don't keep it any longer than it takes to drive from point A to point B. And it's just a matter of logistically setting it up so the people at point B are ready for it. And it works.
So what you're saying is that basically this sort of thing is done with like canned goods and stuff that don't perish quite so quickly. But the reason that it's not done with produce is because it takes some manpower to make it happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, it takes manpower, but it's more of logistics. It has to arrive very shortly to when it's going to be used. The food pantries themselves have all very good distribution systems set up. I mean, they know how to take food and they know who needs it and they know how to get it to those people. What they don't have is the ability to have somebody go out every day to the food store and pick it up. So what we just filled a gap with people who had time to do it, and all we do is take it from point A to point B. The other thing we do to make it easy on the food store is they have just one number to call. It's actually my cell phone. And if they have more or less, or they have something else they want to give, or for whatever reason, they call just one number because they don't have time to call a half a dozen different charities and say, do you want it today? And sometimes they get a voicemail and all that. They want to make just one call. And they call me, and what I do is I have 15 to 20 volunteers, and myself included, and we just take care of whatever their problem is. So we're using a little bit of the old business type sense of making sure that we're easy to do business with. And so all they do is call one number, and sometimes they give us hard goods, sometimes like tables and chairs and things that they can't sell any longer because they got a scratch on it or whatever. And we find other charities to donate those to, and we've got other people that will help us with that. So it's kind of a matter of just the right place at the right time and using extremely simple logistics. I mean, we run a Google Calendar, which is free, and the guy who finds all the charities, he just puts the charity in the day on the Google Calendar. The drivers look at the Google Calendar on their day, and they know where they're going. It's got an address, a phone number, and a coordinator's number, and that's all you have to do.
So what does it take to get something like this set up? If somebody listening to this decides that, hey, that sounds like a good idea, I'd like to try to do that, I have some friends who might be willing to help too, what would they have to do to start something like this?
Well, first of all, you got to have somebody that's going to give you the food. And so you need to go to a major food distributor, and probably depends on whether you have a local, smaller grocery chain or a big one. This one we're working with is a national chain. And they had a lot of corporate rules that we had to get through, but the local management really wanted to do this. Specifically, the lady who was running the warehouse was probably our biggest advocate because it just broke her heart to throw that food away. And then we're all members of a major church, so we have the legalities of being a charity all taken care of because we are a church and we work under their name. And you probably need some type of an entity, such as a church, that basically takes care of the legalities of it. And by virtue of them being a charity, you don't have to worry about all those things. And then you have to make sure you have some place to take it. And there again, within the city of Memphis, there are a lot of food banks. There's probably 50 or 100 of them around. We deal with about 20 of them. And basically, some of the food banks did not want to do this. They didn't, very small percentage, but just didn't feel it was for them. But most of them said, yeah, and as long as we get there on that right day. So it's a matter of just getting people and places together. I happen to have a lot of people on the men's group in the church that I'm working for that are retired. And these guys all felt like doing it. And to them, it's kind of, okay, on Tuesday, I have to go pick up food. And they just work it into their schedule and don't schedule doctor appointments on Tuesday. But even if they have to, I've got plenty of subs, and it takes nothing more than a phone call or a text to get somebody else to take their place.
So basically, I know because a lot of people would be concerned about the legal issues. You have the store or the food chain that you get stuff from is basically taking care of things from their end to make sure that it's okay that that they donate it to you. And since you work with a church and this is done through them, and then it's being given to another officially recognized charity, then it's just basically the store giving to a charity. They just need some middlemen to to cart it around because they don't have the time to make that happen, and the food pantries or whatever don't have time to pick it up. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. It's a logistics issue. They would just as soon give the food to whoever wants it, but they don't have anybody on staff or anybody with time to sit down and make phone calls. Now, when we first started it, one of the three of us, I basically just take care of logistics. I find all the drivers and I help set up the calendar and things like that. One of the other guy works with the food chain and makes sure they're happy and deals with other kinds of things like that. And the third individual, who has really the biggest job, he spends his time calling the various charities and just talking to the directors and saying, would you like this? And then usually on the first run will come from the food store, and either here I'll go with to meet the people and talk to them and show them what we're going to do. And then it just kind of evolved from there. We've been going on probably 5 or 6 months now, and it's at the point where we have a regular route. Not every food bank gets it every week. Sometimes they only want it every other week, depending on how they run their system. And we have people that come up every now and then. But it's running pretty smooth. We've moved probably 5 semi-loads worth of food from point A to point B that would have been going into the dumpster. Two things, the advantage of that: the food store doesn't have to pay dumpster fees for that. In addition, I would imagine they write it off their taxes as a donation as opposed to just spoilage. But I don't know exactly what they do, but they scan everything, so we go. So the real trick on this, I think, if somebody's trying to do that, just make sure that you have charities and legitimate things where there's no anybody can't accuse you of doing anything improper. So as long as you got charity to charity with one in the middle, it seems to move real smooth. We've not really had hardly any issues with it.
You said you've moved 5 semi-truckloads of food. That's a lot of food. How long have you been doing this?
About 5, 6 months, something like that. I'd have to look to be sure. We get somebody actually, one of the guy's wives actually added up how much food we had in the back of his truck if we had to buy it. And it's somewhere around $400 or $500 worth of food per day that would have been in the dumpster, and you would have had to pay a dumpster fee for that. And now it gets distributed to somebody who can eat it. So we look at just how much it's come. It actually surprises us sometimes how much food we do get. On certain days, the truck driver or the guy who's picking it up will have more than he can fit in his truck, and so he makes one call, and I send a second truck. One day I got a call, the truck driver had just left, and they said, "Oh, we just found out we got some bananas. Can you deal with it?" And I was not far from there, so I said, "Yeah, I'll pick it up." So I swung by. Well, I had an entire pickup truck full of bananas. Never seen so many bananas in my life. And so on my way to pick them up, I called the coordinator and I said, "Hey, I just got a truckload of bananas. Help me out." So he gets on the phone. By the time I had picked them up and was sitting in the parking lot of the food store, he called me back and said, "Yep, here's the address. Take them to these people. They're waiting for them." And I took them over there, and I walked in, and they said, "Oh my gosh, that's a lot of bananas." But this was a very large denomination. It was a church, and they had a lot of places to take it. They ran missions all over town, and the lady got on the phone. She goes, "Oh yeah, I'll distribute all this today." She said, "I'll make it all go." Not a problem. It's an awful lot of bananas. So it's amazing how simple it turned out to be, I went and called the drivers, because I've got a team now of people that have been doing this for a while, and I called each one up individually, and I said, "So, how's it going?" "Oh, it's fine. It's just part of my regular week, and it's just something I do, and I enjoy it, and gets me out, and I get to see people and talk to some people." And I said, "Well, are you tired of it yet? Do you need some relief, and time off?" He said, "No, I'm good," because they've got their built-in spare where 2 people do it. And like I said, sometimes the 2 guys will go together, and they got time to get out and meet people and do something, some people just don't have enough to do. I've got one of my backup guys who has told me, he said, look, I got nothing to do most of the time. He said, call me anytime. And I've called him quite often as a backup or as a secondary driver, sometimes when we get an overfill. And he goes, sure, be glad to. It gives me something to do. So, like I say, it just kind of fell into place. It was, there were people that needed it, and all they needed to do is go from point A to point B. What's surprising about it is the amount of things that the church has to put in it. Now, they have given us their old youth van that they had, and we took the seats out of it, and we used that. But we were getting it by with private vehicles. As far as they're concerned, it doesn't cost them anything. The drivers themselves will just take their mileage and turn it in on their income taxes as a charitable donation, because there's a place for that. And this is a legitimate charity thing, driving from point A to point B, and you get so much per mile for that. And it's not that far. They don't drive all that far. They drive maybe 20, 30 miles. So we move $500 or so of food per day. And this is just one food store in the city of Memphis. We haven't really tried to expand beyond that yet, because we want to get our feet on the ground here a little bit, and we're not sure we want to go to another food store, because I'm not sure we would be doubled overnight whether we could do that or not. So we're still negotiating ourselves on what we want to do next.
So you're moving about $500 of food a day and close to a semi-truck load a month. The store that gives you the food probably saves money because they don't have to pay dumpster fees, and they probably write it off on their taxes. It doesn't cost you guys any more than, an individual a couple hours every other week, and the gas it takes to drive from A to B. And it doesn't cost the food pantries or shelters it doesn't cost them anything except sorting through things just a little bit. It sounds like a win for everybody, because hungry people are getting fed that wouldn't have been fed otherwise.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And like I say, the food pantries are really good at distributing the food. And that's what our point was. We didn't want to get in the food distribution business or the food storage business, which is a nightmare. There's already people that do that. Food pantries already know how to do that. They've been doing that, some of these places, for 20 or 30 years. The only problem they had was logistics. Well, it turns out I knew a bunch of people that had time. And so the three of us guys that got together said, yeah, this might work. So we just kind of fell into this thing. We just started doing it real slow. And the next thing happened. And then the food store came to us and said, hey, that's great that you're coming once in a while when we have some stuff. Can you do it every day? We went, whoa, that's, give us a couple days to think about it. Went back and talked to our pastor, and she was all for it. And I put out a notice to the church to see if I could get enough drivers, and they all showed up. I mean, there were all kinds of people that showed up that were willing to do it. And literally overnight, we went from going down there occasionally to every day. And we go down at 7 days a week, 360 days a year, because the store's closed on a few major holidays. And we show up every day at 11 o'clock except on Sunday, because we all go to church, and we show up at 2 o'clock.
That's really awesome. I think that's something that a lot of people hopefully I would like to see a lot of people emulate that and do the same thing, because there's a lot of hungry people and there's food that's just being thrown away. And from what you've been saying today, it doesn't take that much to actually make sure that hungry people get fed, because the food's there. You just have to move it from A to B.
Well, and there are a lot of charities that do that now. There's some very large organizations that currently do this, nationwide. But there are a lot of pockets that this isn't getting done, and it's just a matter of finding a need, finding out if you've got the resources, and everything just kind of fell in place. But yeah, I agree with you. There are a lot of places that are underserved in moving this food around, and it all boils down to logistics, because you have to get rid of this stuff quickly. We wanted to keep it real simple. We make it as simple, and easy to do business with. One phone number to call, and it's a cell phone. One one group of people will pick it up. We keep it for no more than an hour. We don't have nor need nor ever want to store anything, because then you get into all kinds of complexity. if this thing gets very complex, then it'll run into trouble. But it's so brutally simple right now, with a shared calendar and a group of cell phones and texting and people with pickup trucks and time. So yeah, keeping it simple, and it just seemed to work out.
That's really cool. Well, thank you for both what you're doing and feeding hungry people, as well as for doing this interview and telling people about this. And hopefully some of them will decide that maybe they should go down and check to find out if that's something that they can do where they live.
Sure.
So that about does it for today. Thank you, Dad, for sharing with us what you've been doing and for being my first interviewee. If you'd like to hear more content like this, subscribe to this podcast. Also be sure to check out my website, mattdelockery.com, where you can find my blog and other interesting information. Thanks for listening.